All right, well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be with you this morning. I don't know where Sarah went. I didn't get the memo about what to wear either, and so I'm not coordinated at all. I apologize for that. But it is great to be with you this morning, just to get to worship here. Like Pastor Jenny said, so ordinarily I'm in the Sandy campus. I'm the Sandy campus pastor, so most weeks that's where I am, and so I don't get a chance to see the Happy Valley campus on Sunday as often as I'd like to. But I'm here all week. Just not on Sunday, every other day other than Sunday. But it's just great to be here, and I love the worship this morning. Just our youth. I love the fact that our youth help lead us in worship here at Happy Valley. It's awesome. And then the choir this morning, that's so cool. I was seriously tempted to actually come up and join the choir. To be honest, I had a little bit of FOMO. I was watching them up there, and they're having such a good time. And I thought about kind of sneaking up. I actually kind of asked between services. I was like, is it okay? No, you can't. You're not allowed to. I did not make the cut. I did not get to help lead in the OOOs, but that's okay. That's okay, I'm really enjoying being here with you guys. So I've been the Sandy campus pastor for a couple years now, since the summer of 22. And after moving here back to the Pacific Northwest from Texas, me and my family had lived in Texas for about 15 years, and then the Lord called us back. I'm going to save the rest of that story for just a little bit, but just a couple things about my family. First of all, so my wife, Sarah, is the worship pastor at the Sandy campus. In fact, that's where she is this morning. She's leading worship over there. I have three incredible sons. Jonathan is 23. He's still in Texas. As a matter of fact, Ian is 21, and he's in Springfield, Oregon. And then I have my 15-year-old who goes to Barlow High School. He's a sophomore out at Barlow High School, and he also serves at the Sandy campus. And so it's just, it's so wonderful to be here at ALC. And then, like Jenny mentioned, so recently, in addition to continuing to serve as the Sandy campus pastor, I recently stepped into the role of executive pastor, which if you don't know what an executive pastor does, I don't blame you. It's okay. It's fairly behind the scenes. So the executive pastor oversees facilities and finance, technology, staffing, as well as some worship and weekend services. And so I'm kind of all over the place all the time. But the coolest part about that for me, you guys, is that I get to work every day with Pastor Gareth and with this incredible staff team here at Abundant Life Church. In fact, this is a little bit risky to do because I know they're all over the building serving in different ways right now, but just representative, if you're in here and you are on staff or volunteer staff or an elder at ALC, would you stand up for just a minute? Come on, let's just recognize them. Let's just thank them for everything that they do. They are an amazing team, and I know I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but a lot of you haven't necessarily been to the Sandy campus. You're aware that we have a Sandy campus, but you haven't been there. So I feel like I have a responsibility this morning to help kind of just paint a picture for you, just kind of explain a little bit about what it's like at Sandy. And first of all, I should say that the Sandy campus is very much an expression of Abundant Life Church in Sandy. One church in two locations, one vision, one mission, shared DNA, shared purpose, and all of that kind of stuff. But there are just a couple of things that are different. For one thing, it is quite a bit smaller. But one of Pastor Garrett's favorite phrases is punch above their weight class. So they punch above their weight class. Not like Mike Tyson on Friday night. Not like that. Now, I wouldn't be saying that if Mike Tyson were sitting in here, you guys. I'm telling you right now, that would not be happening. In fact, if you could actually wind back the live stream about a minute, if you could just hit undo on that, that would probably be good for me. But there are just some differences, a little bit, just kind of, flavor of the campus. And so, Sandy is a mountain town, right? And so you walk around the campus and, we have stumps for tables, tree stumps for tables. We have, if you go into the kids area, the metal posts that are holding up the building are actually wrapped in tree trunks, like actual tree trunks. I'm serious. And then we have a boulder in there, a giant boulder that I don't know how we got in the building. I really have no idea. But it kind of, it can freak people out a little bit at first. And so when our youth pastor started up there, he came there for his first Wednesday night. And for whatever reason, I think it was for a game, he thought it'd be fun to move the boulder into the youth area. And so he goes to pick it up. That thing is not moving. I mean, it weighs a ton. And so I get from him, and some of you guys, if you were at camp with Tanner, you know the way he talks. He texts exactly like he talks. And so I got the most youth pastory text message I have ever gotten in my life. And it's like, in all caps, wait. These rocks are real? I'm like, yeah, it is an actual legit boulder, And so there's just some of those kind of differences, One funny thing happens, we really love food, right? It's all about food. And so sometimes we have a particular lady there who she'll just show up with like a dozen boxes of donuts. And you just walk out of the service not expecting anything. And there's like, everybody has donuts. It's like Oprah showed up in church that Sunday. You get a donut and you get a donut. Everybody gets a donut. It's just fun, right? I mean, it's just kind of fun. But one thing that I have to admit, and I'm trying to, I've been really just kind of feeling it a little bit emotionally. I mean, since I've been here, I'm trying to adjust to it. I'm trying to get used to it, but it is different. So I walked through the whole lobby, and I got to meet a lot of you and greet some folks and stuff like that. But I went all the way through the lobby and got all the way to the front, and not one person in here handed me a carton of farm fresh eggs from your hobby farm chicken. And, I got to tell you, that's just something that I've gotten accustomed to, and it's fine, it's fine. I'm adjusting, but, at the same time, what am I supposed to eat for breakfast this morning, Happy Valley? Avocado toast? I don't know. That's why I count on that for my protein in the morning, but it's okay. It's okay. It's all great. And I do love the fact that we are at one church in two locations, and that we can celebrate together in so many wonderful ways. Speaking of using our resources to bless others, that was the worst segue ever, wasn't it, Jenny? That was terrible. I apologize, you guys. That was just if Pastor Gareth was here, he definitely would have done that segue better. That much I know. I'm telling you that right now. Speaking of Pastor Gareth, last week he talked about how we can use what God has given us for the glory of God and for the good of others, how to leverage our resources for his kingdom. And so this morning, I really want to just kind of extend that a little bit, and I want to add another component to the subject of how we use our money and our resources. And we're going to explore a little bit about what it means to fully trust in the Lord with everything that we have. And as we get into that subject, I want to spend a little bit of time this morning in the book of Malachi. And if you don't spend a lot of time in the book of Malachi, it's at the end of the Old Testament. And in just a minute here, we're going to be in chapter 3, verse 10. And so if you have your Bibles this morning, you can go ahead and open those up. We're also going to have it up on the screen. Oh, there I am. Look at that. We don't have that in Sandy either. That actually makes me a little bit nervous. This is not meant to be seen close up. Okay, I'm a little bit afraid that I'm going to get caught in 4K with an ear hair sticking out or something like that. I don't know. I apologize if that happens. But, you can turn your phones there. We're going to be there in just a second. But the book of Malachi was written about 400 years before the time of Jesus. And this is really significant because this is right before, so he's at the end of the Old Testament, and it's right before we call the intertestamental period between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And there's just kind of a lot of silence in this period theologically. And so the words that Malachi is writing down have a lot of significance, carry a lot of weight. And one thing to know about Old Testament prophets, right? And Malachi, he was an Old Testament prophet through and through. They were an intense bunch. Okay, if you've read very much about Old Testament prophecies, these were kind of an extreme group of guys. And so in the first couple chapters, Malachi has really, he's just been going off, man. He is just roasting the people of Israel for all the ways that he's saying they haven't been keeping their covenant with the Lord. And, he's just tearing them up. Just fire and brimstone. Just spit flying everywhere, probably, I'm imagining. He's just going off. And he's like, your sacrifices are all wrong. Your priests are causing people to stumble. You're unfaithful. You're unjust. You have poor personal hygiene. He's just coming up with anything he can think of, just to go after these guys, right? And it's got to be kind of hard to hear if you're them. But then in chapter 3, he starts prophesying about the messenger who will prepare the way. Now, we, of course, know that the messenger that he's prophesying about is John the Baptist. And then he starts talking about the coming of the Messiah who will purify the temple. And this is all really good news, but the context that he's sharing it in is kind of a little bit accusatory. It's like, hey, yeah, the Messiah and the messenger are coming, but guess what? They're coming to straighten you guys out, okay? I mean, that's kind of the tone that he's giving them. And then in verse 8, of all things, he starts talking about how they've robbed God with their tithes and offerings. And at this point, you're like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. Hold up, time out here, right? The God of the universe, the God who created everything out of literally nothing, cares about giving. Why is he making an issue out of our giving? You know, with all the other things that he's concerned about right now, why is that a thing for him? Why would he even bring that up? I mean, it kind of just feels like piling on at some point. But if you remember this summer when we talked about the 10 Commandments, one of the things that we talked about is that when God comes to bring admonishment or correction, when he comes to adjust his people, he's not doing it out of a sense of judgment or anger. He's doing it out of love. He's doing it because he wants us as his people to live and walk in the way that he created and intended for us to. And I think that's why something interesting happens next. There's kind of this shift in tone that happens right after that. After he spent all this time just calling them out on stuff, there's kind of this rapid positive shift in tone and then an invitation to do something that you've never heard God say before up to this point, and you never hear it after that. He says, test me. Test me. And those two words are very significant. So now let's go ahead and pick up in Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open up the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test, he says. Your crops will be abundant, for I will guard them from insects and disease. Your grapes will not fall from the vine before they're ripe, says the Lord of heaven's armies. Then all nations will call you blessed, for your land will be such a delight. Now, as we unpack this, these are very densely packed verses. There's a lot going on in here. And so as we take a closer look at that, one thing that would be helpful would be to understand the circumstances and the context that the people of Israel find themselves. And so they're the audience, they're the ones who are listening to this, and where they find themselves really affects how they hear this. And in the Messy Middle series, we spent a lot of time talking about the time of Daniel, and we talked about how at that time the people of Israel were held captive by Babylon. And so this message right here that we're getting from Malachi, this happens about 100 years after the people of Israel had been set free. And they weren't set free by choice. They were actually in some ways rescued by a man named Cyrus the Great. He conquered Babylon. And when he conquered Babylon, one of the things that he did was he released the people of Israel to return to their homeland. And then when they returned to their homeland, one of the first things that they did was to rebuild the temple. Right? And that was a really significant step for them. And so they put all this effort and all this time into rebuilding the temple, but surrounding the temple, all around the temple, there was a lot of lack. There was a lot of, just not the stuff that they had before. When they had left their homeland, they were wealthy, they were powerful, they had a lot of influence. And when they came back, now there's a lot of things that they had going on before they just don't have going on at this point. And what's worse is there's this ongoing drought that's going on that not only do they not have enough water to drink, but it actually is preventing them from being able to grow crops. And so there's a significant lack. And so nobody has very much going on at this point. So surprisingly, even in the midst of that state of poverty and lack, God chooses this opportunity to say, bring all the tithes into the storehouse so there will be enough food in my temple. And if you're in the people of Israel at that time, you got to be thinking, food in my temple? How about food on my table? That's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm living. God, maybe do you realize that we're in a state of lack right now? But here's the challenge that God gives. He says, if you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. There's so much significance in those words. Try it, put me to the test. That's a huge challenge that God is putting out to them in their state of lack right there. He's saying, hey, be faithful to me, put all your trust and hope in me, and I will take care of you. I will take care of you. Go ahead, just try it. Just try it. Just try putting all of your hope in me instead of what you think that you can count on. And when he says, I will open the windows of heaven for you, what he's saying in that moment is, I as God, am going to end this drought that is threatening your life, that's choking your crops, that is leaving you without any water to drink. I will end the drought for you. He's putting out something that only he, as God, is capable of doing. But there's a risk for them. There's a risk for the people of Israel to respond to this word and bring a tenth or a tithe of what little that they have. Because there's also a certain amount there of okay, we have so little, but also kind of what do we have to lose right now? I mean, this is not going well for them. Things are not moving in a good direction for them. And it's really important to note in this, because I've heard this preached in different ways, in different contexts before, and sometimes you can get the wrong idea about, because of the tone of the prophecy, the wrong idea about what's happening with the people of Israel. See, they weren't withholding from God because they were greedy or selfish. They were withholding from God because they were desperate. They were in a place of utter desperation, and God says, I want you to put your desperation on me. I want you to be desperate for me. You see, he wasn't after their resources, he was after their heart. See, it could look so easily to them like, what does God want with the little resources that we have? He's saying, that's not it at all. I'm after your heart. I want to know that you fully trust me. And then there's that phrase, put me to the test. Now, that's a radical statement for the Lord to give them, okay? Now, the people of Israel, they know the Torah, they know the Old Testament backwards and forwards, and they have to realize at that moment that in Deuteronomy 6:16, it says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Do not put the Lord your God to the test. Now he's saying, put me to the test? How is that okay? And God's saying, you know what? I give you permission. In this one thing, you can put me to the test. That's a radical statement to make. And then comes the promise in verse 11, your crops will be abundant, for I will guard them from insects and disease. Your grapes will not fall from the vine before they're ripe. Okay, and again, these are things that only God can do. There is no power on earth, there is no authority on earth that can fulfill the promise that God is making to the people of Israel right there. Only him. He's saying, I'm gonna open up the windows of heaven for you. He's saying, be faithful to me. Put your trust in me. Put your hope in me. You see, this isn't a prosperity prophecy for them. This isn't a give to get strategy. The God of heaven and earth is making a promise to them. He's saying, put that on me. Your desperation, everything that you're going through, your lack, your hopelessness, put it in me. Bring to me the first of what little you have, and I will fill you with the best of all that I have. And then I love this last part in verse 12. It's kind of the cherry on top of the promise Sunday, right? It says, then all nations will call you blessed, for your land will be such a delight. Now, this has to be incredible to them, because if there was one word that people in the surrounding nations probably were not using to describe Israel at this point, it was blessed. They had been before, but at this point in their history, they were not. And so they're hearing this promise, and it's like, I can't even imagine what it would be like for people to actually see us as blessed at this point. You see, you don't come through all of that time of captivity that they walked through unscathed. They were beaten down, they were humiliated, they were just a shell of the nation that they had once been before their long captivity. God says, put your trust in me. And I'm gonna bless your land so much, so extravagantly, that everyone around you is gonna notice. They're gonna notice what I did for you, and they're gonna say, man, God must really love his people to do that for them. What an incredible thing. We see where they were at, and then we see what God did for them. What an amazing thing. People are going to boast in the goodness of God. That's his promise to them. And then, of course, we know this is right before we move into a whole new era. And there's been prophecies about the coming Messiah. And we know that there's something more, even more significant than bringing rain in the middle of a drought. The ultimate expression and fulfillment of this prophetic promise is ultimately Jesus himself. In fact, he speaks this of himself in John chapter 10, verse 10. He says, I have come to give you everything in abundance, more than you expect, life in its fullness until you overflow. When you follow Jesus, he becomes your supply. Whatever you've been counting on, whatever you've been trusting in, he becomes your source. He becomes your supply. Now, I told you earlier at the beginning that I was going to share more with you about our journey of trust, moving back to Oregon after 15 years in Texas. And this is my testimony. This is my testimony of windows of heaven opening up. So I grew up here in Northeast Portland, and my wife Sarah grew up in Springfield. We were a product of the Pacific Northwest. And, honestly, we kind of envisioned being here for the long term. But then in 2007, something really kind of unexpected for us happens. And we felt like the Lord was starting to lead us in a different direction. And it was a very unexpected direction. I mean, from here all the way to the Dallas area of Texas. And you got to know, we didn't know anybody there. We didn't have any friends there. We didn't have any family there. We were going to a church that we had no connection with. It was a Church of Christ. It was a very different church background than what we had come from. But, at the same time, even though it was a big leap of faith, we knew that we were going exactly where the Lord wanted us to go. And we responded in faith. And in some ways, I guess in that season of life, maybe it was a little bit easier. I mean, our kids were very young. We were fairly young, and so we just leaned into that. We just moved in a direction of faith toward that. And we really never, honestly, when we moved that direction, we never looked back. We invested ourselves fully into where we were at. We poured our lives into it. We raised our kids there. We invested ourselves into the church there. And it came to a point where we could never imagine anything being different. I mean, that was the long-term plan for us. But God sometimes has different things in mind than what you can even imagine. And in 2021, we came to a little bit of a crossroads. And it wasn't a crossroads that we actually saw as a crossroads. At first, we just saw it as another step. There was something that was kind of changing for me. I had been in the same role at the church there in worship ministry for close to, a little bit over 14 years, actually. And I was about to move into a role of broader responsibility. And it kind of seemed like the default path. It's like, this makes sense. I mean, this is the road that we've been on. Of course, we would do that. But, we started to move in that direction and take steps in that direction. And it was the weirdest thing. I started to get this just kind of nagging feeling in my spirit that the Lord might have something different in mind for us, that there might be a fork in the road up ahead that I couldn't see or even imagine yet. And I kind of tried to push that aside, kind of tried to not really pay much attention to it, but there was just something, I just knew that there was something that God had in mind. And in fall of 21, I ended up taking about a 6-week sabbatical and just kind of took a break just to kind of recharge and reset and just really seek the Lord and just say, God, what do you have in store? What do you have in mind for this next season for us? And kind of prepare myself for really what I thought the default path was. And as I started to pray, and I was at a retreat center and it was just like out in the woods. I mean, no cell service, just a Bible and a notebook and a fold-out chair in the woods. I mean, that's it. That's all I'm doing, fasting and praying, and the Lord just really started to pull back the layers, just kind of pull back the curtain and show me a little bit more of what he had in mind. And he said, the direction that you think that you're supposed to go, I have something new. I have something different in store for you. And, I didn't know exactly what that meant. And so I kind of went home in some ways a little bit more confused than when I had left. But part of that time away, part of that sabbatical time was actually involved a trip back here to the Portland area. And we came to visit some family and friends. And, there was something for both of us. We just started to feel a little bit of a stirring. It's like, could this be the fork in the road? Could this be what the Lord has in mind? After all these years, we had never imagined ourselves coming back. But, we just started to feel this kind of tug. And so we pressed in prayer and we just sought him more and more. And eventually there was a point in time, there was a point in clarity. And, I couldn't get into all the details. There was just so many just amazing ways that God confirmed what he was speaking to us. But it just became completely clear to Sarah and I that the Lord was in fact bringing us home. that he was calling us back to the Pacific Northwest. Okay, I'm going to share one thing with you. It's second service, we don't have the next one coming up. I'm just going to share this one thing with you. We just kind of got this vision in our mind. We had this potted plant in our front yard, and it wasn't a plant that was actually native to Texas. It wouldn't grow very well if you just tried to put it in the ground, but it had these vines that just kind of crept out over our garden area. And what the Lord showed me that morning was that the way that he saw us and part of his intended purpose, he said, you are that plant. And you've been here for all of this time, but in all of that time, your root system has stayed the same. The soil that you're planted in has never actually changed, but you've had all these vines that have gone out, that have spread out, that have gone out over the garden. But he said, what I intend to do with you is I intend to come back and I actually intend to prune these vines that have gone out from you. And I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to actually take this potted plant and I'm going to move it back to the home soil that you came from. Which was just such a beautiful, just such an amazing picture that we couldn't have comprehended before the Lord shared that with us. And that gave us really the confidence to move forward. And we said, okay, God, okay, this is what we're going to do. And, we started to take intentional steps toward that, start to actively move in that direction. And one thing I feel like I should share with you guys, because you could get, I haven't got to know very many of you that well yet, so you could get maybe an inaccurate picture of who I am. I am not a big adventure person, okay? I am a very intentional planner. In fact, I recently realized that, the way that I communicate, my communication style is actually dictated by the fact that I'm a planner. Everything about me just tends to go that way. And so this whole idea of throwing caution to the wind in my mid-40s, oh, I just revealed that, didn't I? In my mid-40s, right? In this season of life, to say, okay, I'll go wherever you want. That was so not in my character, right? I don't ever do anything haphazardly and carelessly, and yet we were that certain of what the Lord was speaking to us. But every step on that journey, every day, it required leaning into trust. It required a daily surrendering of my will. The Lord would wake me up in the morning about 5 o'clock in the morning before my alarm, which, I had mixed feelings about, but, it's okay. And I would come and I would just come out and I would just spend time with the Lord. And he would just repeatedly bring me to this place of surrendering to him and saying, okay, I trust you. But at the same time, even as I was doing that, there was just, I would be going through life and just the reality of what was happening would start to kind of grip my spirit. Because as we were going, and again, I'm very intentional about things. My wife is very intentional about things. And so we were very aware of all the things that God was asking us to sacrifice, to place on the altar of sacrifice for where he was leading us. We're placing our safety and security on the altar, our relationships, our work in ministry, our home, our possessions, everything that we have. We ended up leaving about half of what we had in Texas because we couldn't take it with us. Even our kids. Our oldest son was halfway through college, and he ended up staying behind. And so we're just putting all of these things, just deliberately, we're putting it on the altar before the Lord. And I have to be honest, at first, the goal was so far off. Where he was leading us was so far away. The only thing that I could see right in front of me, the only thing that was right in my face was just loss. It was just loss. It just felt like sacrifice. And it was hard. And because I'm a planner, I was very aware of all these realities. I knew exactly the kind of risk that we were taking. In fact, in the process, I did, what I could do, just to try to be responsible. And I'm watching every penny that we have going out. And I'm just kind of analyzing, is there any way I can save a little bit of money here? Trying to just kind of make a safety net for myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing to do. But the only problem was I was putting my trust in what I could quantify. And so as I was walking through this process, my trust was actually in what I felt like I could do to help the process. And so not too far into that journey, actually on Thanksgiving Day in 2021, I was in that time of prayer before the Lord, and God asked me to do something that just seemed so outlandish, so crazy. This has got to be the turkey or the stuffing or something. This can't possibly be from the Lord here. I can't be hearing right. But what he called me to do is he called me to take a sizable portion of what I had as a safety net, what I had been carefully setting aside up to that point in our journey. And he said, I want you to give that to me. I want you to give that to me as an offering. And I'm like, God, that's crazy. That's crazy. You know, I mean, like, I would like to, as a pastor up here in front of you, I would like to say, I was like, yes, Lord, thank you for the opportunity to trust you more, you know? I didn't do that, man. I didn't have that going on. You know, I just have to confess to you right now. In fact, I was actually trying to maybe bring a little bit of correction to the Lord, which you shouldn't do. But, you know, I mean, like, so I'm taking this amount that I felt like you put in my heart, and I'm saying, okay, God, first of all, that's a lot. I know you don't use money, you know, I mean, we've established this, but that's a lot. And, you know, that symbol that you're asking me to put in front of that amount, that's called a minus. That's a minus symbol, okay? That's like a going out. I need all pluses right now here. I need more coming in, right? I mean, I'm like the people of Israel. I need food on my table, Lord. Are you kidding me right now? But, you know, he just so gently and so lovingly, he calmed my spirit. Anybody ever had your spirit calmed by God? You know, I mean, you're just kind of like going off on him and he's just going, okay, son, daughter, calm down. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And what he explained to me was he said, you need to subtract so that I can multiply. He said, my kingdom realities are different than yours. My economy is different than yours. You need to subtract in what you have in the natural so that I can multiply what I'm doing with you in the spiritual. In my journey that day, I wrote, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, which is out of Mark 9:24. I said, between hope and despair, I choose hope. And just like the people of Israel, God said to me, he said, trust me, put me to the test. And while it was a struggle, ultimately, we ended up doing just that. And guys, there was something that happened. There was something that happened in us when that happened. That spirit of fear that had tried to grip our heart, that spirit of anxiety that had tried to have a hold on us, something broke in that moment as we released that to the Lord. It was like we stood toe to toe with that spirit of fear and just like with just tenacity and audacity said, we are choosing to trust in the Lord. We are choosing to put our hope and our trust in him. And from that point forward, something was different. Something was different with us. And there was still a long way to go, right? This was fairly early on in our journey. I mean, there was a long, long way to go. In fact, a friend of mine describes these seasons of transition from one place to another as a hallway. And, you know, I gotta tell you, it was a long hallway. You know, I mean, it was like PDX when it was under construction, going from the gate to the exit. You know, like you're gonna be walking for the rest of your natural life. In fact, I should have caught a flight from the beginning of this hallway to the end of the hallway. It was long. But, you know, even in the midst of that, from that point on, whenever I started to feel that panic and that desperation start to rise up, I put my hope in him. I turned that desperation over to him. I remembered that admonishment, test me in this. See what I will do for you. See if I don't open the windows of heaven for you. And guys, I'm here to share with you this morning, and this is my testimony. The windows of heaven opened up and rain started to fall. And something changed from that point. The Lord did things that we couldn't have asked or even imagined. He did everything that we hoped for and things that we didn't even dare to hope for. He did. He did things that only God can do. No one and nothing could have done in that circumstance what the Lord did. He was faithful. He was faithful. And all it took on our part was just saying, God, we trust you. God, we trust you. With everything we have, with everything that we are, we trust you. You know, it makes me think of this passage in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 10. It says, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. He took what little I had. He took what little supply I had and he broke it like he break bread and he multiplied it. He went before us. He opened the windows of heaven and he worked a miracle. He did it for us. He will do it for you. You know, some of you who are here this morning, you may find yourself in a season of desperation. You may find yourself in a season where you just feel like you're in a drought and there's not a drop of rain to be had anywhere, and you don't even know where to turn next. He's saying, trust me. Trust me. Put me to the test. I'm gonna open the windows of heaven for you. And you better get ready. You better get ready because the rain is coming. The rain is coming. The seeds are gonna go down deep, and he's gonna produce a harvest in you. Just trust him. Trust him. Some of you may be in the midst of a hallway. And so when I'm describing this, you find yourself in the middle of a place in between the safety and security of where you were in a previous season and the unknowns of where you're going. And you are in that hallway, and you're just hoping that a door will open up, and it kind of feels like a door is never gonna open for you. His word to you this morning is trust me. Trust me. Put me to the test. See what I'll do for you. See if I won't open just the right door in exactly the right moment for you. He is faithful. He is good, and he is God. Would you pray with me this morning? God, we thank you for your faithfulness. Lord, how much you love us, that you are with us, God, in the midst of every trial, in the midst of every season. Lord, and that you have blessing and blessing abundant to overflow over us. If all we do is just release to you what we have, you will open up your hands. You will open up the floodgates of heaven and rain down on us. So God, I pray that our faith would rise up this morning. God, I pray that we would turn to you. God, I pray that we would pour out our heart to you in our desperation and say, God, we need you. We need you. And in faith right now, we say, we trust you. We trust you. There is no better place. There is no more secure place to be than trusting in him. That is our place of safety. That is our home. That's where we belong, right in the center of where you want us to be. So Lord, we respond to you this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.